hot mustard.
Oh.
Used to have it using burning my own data. Okay, let's go off this. Copy. It's all about the iPhone.
Talk to me.
It's time. Loud. It's time. It's 6:30 p.m. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Villa Park City Council. I hereby call the meeting to order. Steve, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Colacott?
Here.
Councilwoman Miles?
Here.
Councilman Zimmerman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Pitts?
Here.
Mayor Boosie?
Here. Before we start, I would like to ask our city attorney to report out on our closed session. Todd?
Yep, thank you, Mayor. We did discuss the items on the agenda. There's no reportable action at this time. The city manager evaluation will be coming back potentially in open session at the next meeting. For the record, though, Councilwoman Miles did recuse herself from one of the items due to a potential business relationship with one of the parties at issue. That is all.
Thank you very much. Now, tonight, we continue our tradition of inviting a Villa Park distinguished citizen, and in this case, Bill Campbell, the Honorable Bill Campbell, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. But before the Pledge of Allegiance, prior to reciting it, I would like to say a few words about our distinguished guest. Bill Campbell and his incredible commitment to our community, Bill Campbell has had an incredible commitment to our community and the County of Orange. He and his wife and his family have lived in Villa Park for well in excess of 25, probably approaching 30 or more years now. William J. Campbell was born in Los Angeles and grew up in Pico Rivera. Bill, as we know him, excelled in school and worked hard in his family business. After high school, he attended Loyola Marymount University, where he received his Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. Bill continued to show his incredible academic acumen and was subsequently accepted to the Harvard University Business School, where he received his MBA. After graduating from the Harvard University Business School, Bill pursued a career in engineering and spent several years with great companies, including Rockwell Aerospace and a few other companies that revolutionized things such as microchips and even the handheld calculator. Bill was a very good engineer, but found, frankly, a different calling. Bill was asked to join with a few friends and help out with some struggling businesses. He, with his acumen, took over those businesses and helped turn them around. He took struggling organizations and made them successful, which frankly is a common trend throughout Bill's career. Bill put his business degree to work and founded the BEMA Corporation with his wife, Mary. Soon after, Bill and his wife, Mary, started, and the BEMA Corporation, I should say, specialized in Taco Bell franchises, among other things. Bill and Mary were very successful and yet extremely humble with their financial success. While running BEMA, Bill and Mary raised 3 incredible sons that have gone on to do amazing things. Bill and Mary were very active in Villa Park. Their boys attended Villa Park schools, St. Norbert's, and later Mater Dei High School. Despite this personal and despite his personal and professional success, he had unfinished business. Right when you thought he'd done enough, nope, there's a whole other chapter to go. Bill felt a true calling for community service, something that was instilled in him at a very, very early age. As a young man, Bill had visited with his Aunt Mary in Washington, D.C. Aunt Mary had a huge impact on his life, as well as several of his other family members. As one of 6 very successful, quote-unquote, farm girls from Kansas, Aunt Mary rose to become the second highest non-political civil service member, which is an incredible accomplishment, especially considering the times. After a number of years, Bill was approached by a group of very successful business professionals and community leaders to run for political office. He remembered those conversations, he remembered those visits with Aunt Mary, and he remembered that he could make a difference in the way that she did. And Bill obviously had a very high regard for public service, and as such, he had some serious decisions, some considerations. He talked these over with his wife, Mary, a true partner in his life, and they agreed that they could make it work. Bill ran for assembly and was successful. Mary took over the corporations. So you have truly a partnership there. He served 6 years in the assembly and later served as an Orange County supervisor, chairman, I believe, twice. He served as a supervisor from 2003 to 2012 and was instrumental in protecting our special community and keeping Villa Park a hidden jewel. We all owe Bill and Mary a huge debt of gratitude. Please join me in giving Bill a hand.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm honored to be the distinguished citizen for this month. And you brought back some great memories there. I was smiling to myself because there's stories about each one of those that could go on and on. But I thought tonight I'd just like to share with you how we got to Villa Park. It's a fun story. As you said, Mary and I were both born and raised in Los Angeles County, married in 1967, and had our first apartment up in Westchester, moved to Orange County in about 1970, our second apartment in Huntington Beach, and bought our first home at S&S Home in Seal Beach, 2,400 square feet on 6,000 square feet of land. And that was something we were really proud of, but of course you could reach out the side door and shake hands with your neighbor too. We moved to Saratoga, California about 3 years later, up in the San Jose area, and bought a 2,700 square foot house with a pool on 1/3 of an acre. And we thought we had died and gone to heaven. It was a great place to have a yard and actually have some neighbors that weren't quite so close, but still good friends. When I moved back to Orange County, an interesting thing had happened while we were still in Saratoga. We had continued to subscribe to the Orange County Register on Sunday because we knew we'd be coming back sometime. And one of the weekends, it featured in the real estate section a whole story about this little community called Villa Park that had minimum half-acre zoning. And we thought to ourselves, well, that's kind of interesting. So we came down and Rockwell arranged for me to go out with some realtors to find a home down here. And we ended up going over into Irvine and went to one of the tract sales places and saw that they were again something on 6,000 square feet, big home, but not much property. And we said, well, we're looking for something with about a half acre. And the guy said, well, you want to go to Corona then. So we didn't go to Corona. We came to Villa Park, and you heard the rest of the story. We've been here since 1974, and I love it and made good friends, participated in an awful lot of activities. Probably the Villa Park Women's League, a great impact on my wife. Santiago Canyon Tennis Club, where we made friends for life there, and still most of them are here in the community. So thank you again, and let me lead the Pledge of Allegiance. If
Please.
we can have everybody stand, put your hand over your heart, and let's honor this wonderful flag of our great nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council.
We have a photo with you?
Oh,
please,
sure.
Council. Watch the cord.
Yep. One more time. Got it.
We have a special pen that we're presenting to you. This is for being a distinguished citizen. It is truly an honor for me to present this to you.
Thank you, sir. Am I crowding you?
What's that?
I felt like I was crowding you. It's over like this.
Oh,
I was giving you some.
no, it's okay. Ah, come on, you.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask all of those in the audience to please silence your cell phones or turn them off if possible. The Villa Park City Council and staff welcome you to this meeting, and we encourage your participation. If you wish to address the City Council, please complete and submit the blue speaker cards and provide them to the city clerk before the scheduled meeting time. Speaker cards can be found at the entrance to the City Council chambers. Speakers will be limited to a time period of 5 minutes. All right, next we have some recognition, long overdue, that we need to provide to the Orange County Sheriff's Department. It is truly an honor to have these brave men in the audience here. Lieutenant Rich, I'd like you to lead the way and tell us a little bit about your deputies. We are honored to have them here, and we'd like to introduce them to our community.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I am Lieutenant Patrick Rich, and I am the Villa Park Chief of Police Services. I am very blessed to be here tonight to honor some of the staff that works with me and for the city and the citizens of Villa Park. When we originally discussed doing this, we were a little unsure of the best way to go about this recognition, and in meetings with the council members and you and the city manager, we decided that it would be a great idea to bring the deputies that work the city up, give a quick, brief bio about them, and let them let the citizens get to know them, hoping that when they do see them, they will be willing to go out and talk to them and say hi, maybe have a cup of coffee with them, and the small town feel that, Villa Park should have. So let me get on with this, because I do tend to talk a little bit. After 25 years in law enforcement, I know that it is typical, not under the best of circumstances, when a citizen has police contact. And it is not uncommon for us, law enforcement, to be the target of frustration. Most people, when they meet a deputy, it's under a traumatic incident. They've been a victim of a crime, something's happened to a family member of them, or they're being stopped for what I would think of as a simple traffic violation. Unfortunately, what we consider day-to-day things, it's unusual for someone, and it can be a traumatic experience. One thing that I can truly say about the city of Villa Park is we, the deputy sheriffs work in the city, are truly blessed to be part of a city where we are supported by our mayor pro tem, our council members, the city manager, the city staff, and most importantly, the residents of the city of Villa Park. So I would like to take an opportunity here to introduce these four gentlemen, and I will start off with our school resource officer, Deputy Brian Benzie. This is probably going to sound like something you probably already know, because I'm sure most of you are very familiar with Brian, as he has been a fixture in the city for a little while. And that Brian was born and raised in nearby Orange. His roots in Villa Park go back to the 1950s, when his grandfather Charlie and grandmother Pauline Benzie bought some land near present-day Santiago in Sycamore. They owned and operated the Villa Park Poultry Ranch, where they sold their eggs to Bruno's Market and soon to open Ralph's. While growing up, he played baseball at Villa Park Little League and often rode his bike through Villa Park to buy candy from Jim Brodsky at the Villa Park Pharmacy. Brian attended Cerro Villa Middle School and Villa Park High School, graduating in 1996. After graduating from Cal State Fullerton, he worked several sales-related jobs in the private sector before hiring on with the Sheriff's Department in 2009. After 5 years at the Theo Lacey Maximum Security Jail and 3 years patrolling unincorporated areas of North Orange County, he was selected to be the school resource officer in the city of Villa Park. And for the past 2.5 years, he has served in that capacity. Brian is very good at his assignment, and he loves the job that he does, and he is grateful that he gets to serve the community where he grew up in the schools that he actually attended as a child. Brian is married to his wife, Erica, and they have 2 boys. Gavin, a 6th grader, who just happens to be here tonight. Gavin, if you don't mind, stand up. Anything you want to say? All right. I agree with you.
Smart kid, smart kid, smart kid.
And well said. Ann Donovan, a 3rd grader at Serrano Elementary. Both boys play for Villa Park Little League, and Brian enjoys coaching them, as well as volunteering his free time on the Villa Park Little League board. One more question before I go on. How'd you guys do in your first game? Okay. It wasn't because of the coaching, was it? Okay. Brian is a true asset to the city of Villa Park, the schools, and anyone in the surrounding communities who have children in any of our Villa Park schools. Brian has been instrumental in developing the Villa Park High School Disaster Response Plan, and has helped navigate several critical incidents involving students and threats on campus. Most recently, in December of 2018, he was instrumental in coordinating a multi-jurisdictional response involving a swatting incident where schools in Orange, Anaheim, and Villa Park received bomb threats and threats of an active shooter on campus. This culminated in the lockdown of 7 schools, and Brian was the first person there and someone I was immediately able to reach out to get a feel for what was truly going on in our schools. That went very well. No one was injured. All the parents were fed information on a quick basis so that there was no panic amongst them, and that would not have happened without Brian. So, as I said before, we are truly blessed to have Brian serving in the capacity of our school resource officer. So again, Brian, thank you. Excuse me. Deputy Marco Corrales. Marco? Thank you. Is a 6-year veteran of the Orange County Sheriff's Department, 4.5 years in custody, during which time he was part of the emergency response team, a training officer, and facilitated the community work program. The community work program is a program where low-level criminal offenders go out and do work for counties and agencies in lieu of being incarcerated. Deputy Corrales has been assigned to North Patrol for 1.5 years. And unfortunately, he just left the city of Villa Park after a year of service. During that year, Marco made multiple warrant and DUI arrests, as well as 2 car stops of gang members driving through our city, both of those found to be in possession of loaded and stolen handguns. He also conducted a vehicle stop with 4 subjects who had stolen property from a residential burglary in North Tustin, driving through the city of Villa Park. A vehicle stop in which he seized over 10 pounds of marijuana packaged for sales. 2 separate vehicle stops with subjects who were in possession of stolen mail and personal identifying information related to identity thefts in the area. Although because of his burning desire to move to a slightly busier area, and him being fluent in Spanish, I begrudgingly granted him a transfer to unincorporated Anaheim, where he now works. I wanted to bring Marco in tonight to thank him for his service to the city of Villa Park, and hoping that I can convince him to reconsider and eventually come back to Villa Park. Marco is also a certified drug recognition expert, and he utilizes these skills when conducting DUI stops and drug investigations. Thank you, Marco. And third, I would like to introduce Deputy Mario Albergue. Mario. Mario has also had 6 years of service on the Orange County Sheriff's Department, including 3 years as a deputy assigned to the Theo Lacey facility. While at the Theo Lacey facility, he was a member of the emergency response team. He was a jail training officer and also served as 1 year working hand in hand with our Homeland Security with the Orange County Intelligence Assessment Center as part of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Unit. I would like to go on and explain to you what they do, but I don't think I can without violating some kind of confidentiality or getting myself in trouble tonight. Yes. Mario has 2 years' experience as a patrol deputy and has been working in the city of Villa Park for 6 months. Mario was an instrumental part of our homeless outreach team responsible for clearing the Santa Ana riverbed in 2017. He has made several high-quality enforcement stops over the past 6 months and typically is one of our highest producers of traffic citations. I'm sure everyone loves to hear that. Yes. Although I can tell you most of his stops end up in warnings being issued, as with most deputy sheriffs, he conducts traffic stops looking for some other type of criminal activity. Be cautious when talking to Mario, as he possesses a bachelor's degree from Point Loma Nazarene University in sociology and psychology, and it is not uncommon for him to psychoanalyze someone, usually me, during a conversation. Once again, thank you, Mario. The fourth deputy I would like to introduce tonight is Deputy, Enrique Hernandez. I should know that, Enrique. I apologize. Enrique is a lifelong resident of Orange County, lifelong being all of 28 years, and an 8-year veteran of the Orange County Sheriff's Department. He began his career at the age of 20 as a correctional services assistant working in the jails. In 2014, he was promoted to deputy sheriff and graduated from the academy. He has been a patrol deputy for just over 1 year and joined the city of Villa Park, replacing Marco when he moved on to unincorporated Anaheim. Enrique, who is fluent in Spanish, did an excellent job for the department while working the areas of North Tustin and unincorporated Santa Ana, where he was very, very proactive. Using almost every second of the time he was not assigned on the calls for service to conduct preventative patrols. One of the first calls he handled while off training was a murder-suicide. A tragic incident in North Tustin. I had the opportunity to watch him work during this incident, and I was very impressed with the way he handled himself. He looked like a 20-year veteran law enforcement officer. He was solid, and I could not have asked him to handle anything better. He has a great eye for spotting a criminal element, has been involved in several excellent observed arrests, including last December when he observed a burglary in progress in North Tustin. He attempted to detain the subjects who fled at a high rate of speed, and after a very high speed pursuit, all these subjects were taken into custody. Once again, everyone, Deputy Enrique Hernandez. And I would just like to ask everyone, especially those in the audience, if you see these gentlemen around the city, please stop, wave, say hi to them. Don't ask them to have a cup of coffee with you, or I would say donuts, but they're all in great shape and they probably don't eat donuts. So don't do that. And thank you once again. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce these gentlemen to everyone.
Thank you, sir. And I don't know if you wanted.
Sorry, Mayor.
Mayor, if I suggest we can get a picture, we can
Yeah, absolutely.
all the deputies and then come up with the council.
Front and center, next to the mayor. All right.
Well done. Thank you, gentlemen. Be safe out there. God bless.
You guys don't want to stick around?
Food.
I'm just saying this. I know this is going to be hard for all of you to believe that I had to order them to be here because they're very shy and very humble.
The next presentation for this evening is from Principal Catherine Rizzo of Serrano Elementary. Please come forward.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I am very proud and honored to be here tonight. One of the goals that I set for myself last year was to instill some programs to raise the level of awareness for our students of community service. So we put into place some community service opportunities, and with me tonight are under the direction of Mr. Art Cooney. I have our junior Rotarians, and I'd like them to come to the stage. And so Villa Park Rotary is just a wonderful opportunity of, it's just a good example of what our goals are for serving our community. And we love Villa Park and we love to help others. And Catherine, I want you to come up here because I think you're going to be speaking right here. Yeah. And anyway, we were super excited to have an opportunity to bring this club to our campus. We started last year. This is our second year. And I'm going to turn it over to the students because this is not about me. It's about them.
Hello, Villa Park. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Mr. Rosini, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Pitts, and the Mayor of City Council. We are here from Serrano Elementary representing Early Act Junior Rotarians, which is a volunteer program, community service program consisting of 6th graders from Serrano Elementary School. Recently, we organized a fundraiser supporting efforts to raise money for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Leading up for that week of our fundraiser, we went to all the classrooms to help motivate the children and bring as much money as possible. The week of the fundraiser, we went to all the classrooms each day to collect the money turned in. And as a result of our effort at school, we was able to raise $3,500 for a very worthy cause. This was the second year our school has helped organize for this fundraiser, and in those 2 years, we've raised nearly $10,000.
In addition to that fundraiser, we have also volunteered at Huntington Beach for many beach cleanups, Second Harvest Food Bank, and have helped around the school in keeping it clean during very windy.
We will continue to look for even more volunteer opportunities and community service opportunities this school year in hopes to help others in our community and build positive and helpful character traits. And our students, thank you for letting us share to all of you what we have as 6th graders have been able to do this year. Have a great, good evening. Thank you.
Let's get a photo. Good job. Well done.
I'll take it and I'll send it to you.
Get everyone in. All right, 1, 2, 3.
You want me to get back how many times you have to do that?
Oh, that's all right.
Thank you so much, Principal Rizzo. Appreciate it. Kids are doing a great job. School's doing a great job. Keep up the good work. Thank you, parents.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
Our next presentation for the evening is from SoCal Edison. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Kelly Lee, and I am the Southern California Edison Local Public Affairs Representative for North Orange County. I represent 11 cities from Tustin all the way to La Habra. I'm excited to be here and formally introduce myself to you as a resource to your council. And in addition to our presentation today, I've already met with the mayor and city staff to discuss our program, our wildfire mitigation, safety, and grid resiliency. So I would also like to highlight with the public that I encourage them to update their contact information on our website at sce.com or by calling our phone number at 1-800-455-6555 so that we have up-to-date information. And now I would like to introduce Bob Steens, Local Public Affairs Manager and our subject matter expert.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Sorry, my voice is going, so I may be hitting the water. Honored to be here tonight to talk about our Southern California Edison's wildfire program. Just a little background, one of Kelly's colleagues in our public affairs group, and I manage our emergency planning efforts for normal emergencies. But for the last year or so, I've been pretty much full-time on our wildfire program. And really concentrating on our outreach to cities and counties as well. So if we go to the next slide. You know, we used to have, those of us who grew up in Southern California, we used to have a wildfire season, probably July, August through October, November used to be the wildfire season. That's no longer the case. We're now in a 12-month wildfire season, although we're fortunate the last month or two have been very wet, but of course, we know that's going to bring, come summer, is a lot of grass and a lot of stuff to burn, but it's good news. So 10 of the most destructive fires in the history of California have happened in the last 4 years. And if you look, I think 8 of the last, of the 10 most destructive have happened in the last 2 years now. So there's clearly something going on. We can debate what it is, climate change, drought, but clearly something going on where we're having many more wildfires than we used to have. And not only more, but bigger and much harder to control. So go to the next slide. So we've had, Southern California Edison, we've always had some long-standing practices on how we deal with trying to prevent wildfires. But as a result of what's been going on over the last couple of years with the, it used to be called the new normal, now I think it's called the new abnormal, but with the drought and these more fires, all the utilities in California have taken an effort to do what we can to help prevent fires. So on the left-hand side here, I want to talk about some of our long-standing operational practices. And this is a practice that we have right now. If a circuit that serves anywhere, if it relays, we automatically retest it. And if it tests okay, we re-energize that. If we're in a condition, if we're in red flag conditions, and those circuits are in what's called a high fire hazard area, and much of Villa Park is in a high fire hazard area as determined by California Public Utilities Commission consulting with CAL FIRE and many other fire agencies. If that circuit relays during a red flag warning, we don't automatically, it'll test, but if it tests, so even if it tests okay, we don't automatically re-energize it because we want to make sure that there's not a tree branch in the line or something that could cause a fire if we re-energize the line. So we actually have to go out and patrol that line before we re-energize it. Now the good news is in a community like this, it doesn't take us long to patrol the line because our folks can get out in their truck and drive the lines. Some of the more remote areas of our region, it does take a while to patrol lines. So what I'm going to talk about in the next sort of 3 buckets here is our investing in our system hardening of the grid, bolstering our situational awareness, and then enhancing our operational practices. So looking at the next slide. So just a quick summary here. We're really focused right now, we have been for a long time, but we increased our emphasis on preventing ignitions. Now, utility lines only cause about 8 to 10% of fires, but we want to reduce that even further as we can. Making our grid more resilient, our system more resilient, so it can stand up to fires when they go through. So we're looking at some near-term mitigations, and that's stuff like veg management. Some of the switches we're installing, and I'll show you some about that. And then the longer term mitigations is what we call system hardening, hardening our infrastructure to make it less likely to cause an ignition source. And there's all kinds of smart people who are using some very sophisticated risk-based analysis on deciding what to do and where to deploy that. So if I can go to our next slide. So let me maybe pass this around up to the council. One of the big tools we're starting to deploy is what we call covered conductor. So right now, if you go out and look, it's been the industry standard for a long time. It's just bare metal wire. And that's been the industry standard for years and years. We are starting to, in high fire areas, deploy what this is called covered conductor. So the advantage of that is if a tree branch blows into those lines, it can't conduct electricity and spark a fire. If it falls down, if it breaks, it falls down, it's much less likely to start a fire. Now, the one note of caution, especially with our first responder friends, I want to stress, just because it's, and the public as well, if you see a piece of covered conductor lying in the street, treat it like a bare wire. Don't get near it. Call 911, and because it can still conduct electricity. So we want to stress that as people people go out and see that it still does conduct electricity. So we've already installed about 150 miles of that. We're looking at getting another couple hundred probably this year, with a goal, and it keeps changing, which is good. But to get up about 600 miles of that line, and 600 conductor miles of that line in the next couple years. We're looking at how we can increase that, but it's a matter of resources, both our crews, as well as the supply of this covered conductor. Go to the next slide. Some of the other things we're doing is fire-resistant poles. We're looking at places, particularly in areas, again, in the high fire hazard areas that maybe have a history of fires, of replacing them with the fire-resistant poles. Now, the good news, that's not going to necessarily prevent a fire, although some of the equipment on the top that I'll talk about helps prevent fires. But what it does, if a fire does go through that area, we can restore service much quicker, especially in some of our more remote areas where we have to replace poles by helicopters, have crews hike in. With these poles, they're designed to withstand a fire. We're also looking at equipment, which is some of the stuff that you can't really see on the top, but it's stuff, fast-acting fuses that, again, if they detect a short circuit, they shut down very quickly. Again, all with the goal of reducing the chance of our equipment starting a fire. So the next slide is vegetation management. This is a big issue for us. It's a big issue for the state, and it's quite frankly going to be a bigger issue for us. But I had no idea about the scope of this until I started working on this program last year. But we in Southern California Edison, we have 800 pruning contractors, and that number is increasing. We inspect almost 1 million trees a year, and these are trees that are in or along adjacent to our right-of-way. We pruned last year, pruning about 700,000 trees a year, and almost over half of those are in high fire hazard areas. So we want to do, again, our emphasis on minimizing the chance that a fire can be started with our equipment. And most of the time when a fire does start with electrical equipment, it's because a tree branch or vegetation blows into those lines. So last year we removed almost 25,000 dead or dying trees. And if you look at what that was 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was like 1,500 trees. So it's a combination of our more aggressive effort, but also just the conditions we have with the drought and the bark beetle. And we're also employing more high-tech LiDAR technologies to detect trees for removal. And then go to the next slide. So this is sort of the whiz-bang science part of what we're doing. You know, for years what we do is when we're looking at red flag warnings or conditions, we rely on the National Weather Service to say the Orange County area will expect winds and weather conditions of a certain level. That's not good enough for us now as we go through, and as I'm going to talk about doing the public safety power shutoff. We want to get down to a much smaller level. So, and I'm just looking at the new statistics here because we've got new numbers. But last year we installed 125 weather stations, and that's a little picture there on the upper left-hand corner, there's one in Villa Park, up in the hills in Villa Park, and there's a couple more in this area that are planned. And by the end of 2020, we hope to have 850 weather stations throughout our service territory. And again, the goal of those is to help us do the monitoring the weather conditions at a very, very micro level, rather than have to rely on data at a bigger level. We're using advanced weather modeling. We actually have a full crew of meteorologists on board at Edison, and they're constantly, especially when we get into the red flag warnings or the issues where we might have a red flag, they're constantly monitoring the conditions. We've also installed, I think we're up to 60 now, high definition fire cameras, including, I think there's about 8 of them in the Orange County area. And what these do is the fire departments actually have the ability to, anybody can monitor. If you look at that website on the bottom, that alertwildfire.org, you can go in and look at the cameras if you want. You're not going to see much other than a bunch of landscape, but they're not in urban areas. They're up on the hilltops, so we can scan for potential fires. But what those do is once a fire is detected, it gives fire departments the ability to look at it. They can triangulate from other cameras, so they can know where and how many resources to deploy. The fire department, anybody, like I say, anybody can go on and look at the cameras. Fire departments have the ability to actually get in and control the cameras and move them to help them get the information they want. One other thing, if you look at sce.com/weather station, that's where you can see where the weather stations are in our service territory, the SCE ones. But in addition to hopefully we get up to 800 of them, we're also relying on a multitude of other weather stations, again, with the goal to help us get a much more precise idea of what the weather is locally. So the next slide. So public safety power shutoff. It is, quite frankly, I mean, it's simply a case where we're Southern California Edison, and other utilities do this too. San Diego Gas and Electric has had this practice in place for about 10 years. PG&E has it. We've had it in place for a number of years, but haven't really used it frequently until last year. It's in extreme weather conditions, but it's a situation where we will make a decision to de-energize a line to prevent when certain conditions are met and to prevent a wildfire, hopefully prevent a wildfire. Just because there's a red flag warning doesn't mean there's going to be a PSPS. It's a number of factors that get considered, that get taken into account, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the frequency of them, it depends on the conditions. We're going through and doing more and more analysis as we get more data. We're able to do more analysis. So we don't have a magic number of how many times it'll happen. We did it 3 times last year. But as I'll talk, one of the things we were able to do is I'll mention in a minute, is we're able to get down to a very small part of the circuit. Instead of de-energizing the entire circuit, we're able to de-energize a very small part of it. And then the decision to make that, we will institute for I guess all my emergency guys left, but a incident management team, which is a standard practice that we use at Southern California Edison, and it's some of our senior incident commanders are involved in making the decision to de-energize, and I'll go over what some of those factors are in a second. The next slide. So there's sort of, even though there's 4 pictures up here, I sort of say there's 3 buckets of information we use when we make the decision to de-energize. The first couple are the science. So it's our meteorologists. They're looking at what are the weather conditions, and it's got to be windy, it's got to be dry, low humidity. It's got to be certain temperatures to take into account, and one of the most important ones, which fortunately, at least for now, we're able to see some relief on, is the fuel moisture content. How dry is the vegetation on the ground? So that's the first sort of science part of it. And then we have a fire behavioral specialist or fire scientist that we hired into the company last year, and he used to be with the U.S. Forest Service. So and he's very well respected in the industry. So he helps us do modeling and especially concentrating on what the fuel content is. So that's the science bucket. The second bucket we use is real-time observation. So before we make the decision to de-energize, again, this is if all things go as planned, we have what we call a patrolman or a troubleman out in the field looking at the lines, monitoring what's going on. And those guys and women who are in that field, and they know those lines better than their kids. They know those distribution lines better than their kids. They know what parts they're potentially trouble with. So they're on that, they're monitoring the lines and will be involved in any decision to de-energize. And the third bucket is what else is going on in the neighborhood, in the community? Is there an existing fire going on that we maybe want to keep the power on to keep water pumps going on? Is there an evacuation going on that we want to try and keep the traffic lights on? So all three of those factors are taken into consideration before the decision to de-energize is made. Go to the next slide. So the timeline, what's sort of the process? And again, this is under our ideal or our planned process. The weather's the weather, and it can sometimes not cooperate, and we don't think it's going to get windy, and then it will. When we did this in October of last year, we were predicting 48 hours out that, hey, it looks like we're going to get these conditions. But at the time, at that 48 hours, it was pouring rain. So it's again, it's weather, but you know, through all the technologies, we're getting better at it. So 4 to 7 days out, and this is the time frame at Edison. So 4 to 7 days out, our meteorologists are forecasting the weather. They're looking at our data plus all of the sophisticated models that we use, and they can see, yeah, you know, it looks like something's going to go on in this area. We're not activating any teams. We're not calling customers yet, but we're just internally standing up and getting ready. 3 days out is when we get much better weather forecast. So 3 days out is when we start looking at the circuits that would be impacted. It's when our incident management teams get put on alert and get told be ready to spend the next 3 or 4 days at our EOC in Irwindale. And then in 3 days out, we're going to notify the county operational areas that this is a potential. Again, it's still at a very high level. We don't have the exact circuits yet, but we're letting the county operational areas know so they can start planning. 2 days out is when we start, and this is, again, the ideal situation. It's not necessarily 2 days before, 48 hours before we're going to turn off the power, but it's 48 hours before the weather conditions will start that may cause us to turn off the power. So we have four waves of the notification. The first wave, first group to get notified are our local government partners, because we know as soon as we start calling your residents where they're going to call. They're going to start calling City Hall, they're going to call police, fire. So we want to give a little bit of heads up notice to them. We then start calling what are called our critical care customers. And those are customers that are on some type of a life-saving device. Now this is a practice that's in place right now. If a car hit a pole in Villa Park and the power was going to be off for an extended period of time, we do a process where we call those customers to let them know the power is going to be off for an extended period of time. If they don't, it's through a automated dialing. If they don't answer the phone, we then, one of someone in our call center will pick up the phone and call. And if that doesn't work, we send someone to their door. So we want to make sure that customers that are going to be, these customers that are on some type of a life-saving device know that. The difference here is we're going to start that process 48 hours ahead of time. The next group of customers that get notified are what we call our critical essential customers, so hospitals, water companies, water departments, and then finally all the rest of the customers. And as Kelly mentioned, it's really important for customers to go onto our website, the sce.com, and update their customer information, because if we don't have your phone number or your email or your cell phone, we can't contact you. You know, we're at a stage now where a lot of people set up their account with Edison 15 years ago when they had this thing called a landline. They've got rid of the landline. They now rely on their cell phone for everything, but they haven't updated their records. So it's really important for customers to update their customer information. We then repeat that process out 1 day ahead, 24 hours out, same order, same process. If customers are no longer on the list, we tell them they're no longer on the list. We might be adding some more to it as well. The third time we make the notification is after we shut off the power. You might ask, why are we calling customers to tell them we shut off their power? Well, we want them to know that, yep, we know it's off, so they're not necessarily calling our call center and potentially overloading our call center. We then repeat the same process out when we restore power. Because at this point in time, if we call a customer and say, hey, we've restored power, if it's not on at their house, or maybe a issue with the local transformer or the line that feeds their house, then we want them to contact our call center and let us know so we can send a crew out. Now, like I spoke about earlier, where during a windy condition, we go out and inspect the lines before we re-energize them. The same thing here. We don't just re-energize the line because the wind stops blowing. We go out and patrol the line to make sure that there's no damage, there's no metallic balloons in the line, there's no vegetation in the line, that there's no damage to the line. And once that is done, the troubleman or the patrolman who's out patrolling the line will get on his radio and call in, and it's energized within minutes after we get the all clear. One of the things we've done this 3 times in late last year, and we learned from each one of these. So we've been improving our process as we've done each one of these. We've been working with the county EOCs, and in some cases the local police department, local law enforcement to, again, what can we learn? One of the things we've been able to do when we originally designed this plan, we thought we'd be shutting off the entire circuit. So like in a community like Villa Park, circuit starts at the substation, goes through a lot of Villa Park. It's not in necessarily a high fire area, and then gets up into the high fire hazard area. Sorry, too many words. So I mean, initially, we may have to shut down that entire circuit until we can get out and inspect it, and then re-energize the part of the circuit that's not in the high fire hazard area, but just leave off the part of the circuit that's in the high fire hazard area. So far, with the 3 times we've done this, we've only had to de-energize a very small portion of the circuit. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to always happen that way, but our goal is to minimize this. Again, we've done this 3 times, probably about 8 or 10 circuits involved, and less than 150 customers the times we've done that. So with that, I will stop and answer any questions.
Council?
There are some vital pieces of infrastructure that are powered by electricity, such as sewage lift stations and water wells and so forth. Are there any plans going forward to harden the energy supplies to those critical facilities so that, let's say, part of the circuit can be shut down, but we can keep that going? Hate to see sewers backing up into people's houses and people not having water for an extended period of time because of a circuit shutdown.
So we're looking at that. We've been working with water agencies and communication providers on seeing what can be done. But a lot of this is really, it comes down to, customers, cities, cell phone companies, water companies need to be resilient themselves, because as one of our VP said, that if we're in a situation where we're potentially considering doing this public safety power shutoff, chances are the line's going to go out because of the wind before we shut it off. But we are looking at, and that's one of the reasons we do the 48-hour notification. So the local water companies have a chance to either fill their reservoirs or take actions, potentially deploy generators. Same with the communication companies. So we're doing what we can to educate and partner with them, and then again, as we do the general system hardening, put the covered conductor in, and that helps not only the individual, that helps not all the customers that are on that circuit.
Thank you.
Questions? I've got a couple questions. In some of the higher fire areas that you referenced, have considerations been given to putting them into a technological situation where they don't have to be shut off? Because we get a tremendous amount of wind in this city, probably 10 or 12 wind events a year. And if the power potentially is being shut off to those homes 10 or 12 times a year, or homeowners are being at least alerted, if not potentially inconvenienced, and I get it, public safety is number one, but let's be honest, the customers, unless their house is on fire, they're not necessarily considering it a benefit. I think those of us in public safety and maybe a few others might see the value in that, but not everybody does. And there's also the consideration of if this is now the new normal, have there been some considerations to undergrounding sections of power lines to avoid this? Because it seems like there's a tremendous amount of technology going into supporting what's above ground, but if the wind and the branches are still there, has there been a cost-benefit analysis done on undergrounding some of that? I mean, obviously that's a very expensive process, and many residents in Villa Park cannot either afford that or would support that. don't want the inconvenience, but there are a number that would. I'm just concerned that I want to make sure that you guys are looking at all aspects of it, and if there are 10 to 12 wind events a year, that's a heck of a lot of interruption that will affect property values and might trigger disclosures in the sale of a home.
So the most effective, as I talked about earlier, a lot of really smart people doing risk analysis, and the most effective way as far as buying down the most amount of risk is the covered conductor. Because it can be installed, it's much more cost effective than undergrounding. It can be done very quickly. After the fire in Malibu, we replaced all of that line with covered conductor in a matter of weeks. If we had to underground that, it would be, I can't even fathom how long. We are looking at, are there opportunities and spots where it does make sense to underground? It's something that we're evaluating. And also, willing to, sit down with the city and look at potential options for that. But the main thing we're going to be tool we're going to be using to mitigate the risk is that covered conductor.
And who makes that decision? Is that the Orange County Fire Authority as our the entity that provides fire services to us, or is that SoCal Edison that says we're going to flip that switch right now because the wind is forecast to be this?
It's Southern California Edison makes that decision.
Okay.
But again, we will be, again, the three events the events we've had, we've been in close contact with the Orange County Emergency Operations Center to coordinate with them. Because again, we want to know, is there an evacuation going on? Now, that doesn't mean we wouldn't turn it off, but if there's an evacuation going on and the main intersection off on, in the area is out and it's going to delay evacuations, we want to know that because that's a factor that'll get taken into account before we make the decision to de-energize. But the decision to de-energize is all on Southern California Edison.
Thank you. Thanks for coming this evening.
No problem.
Any questions in the audience? Staff? Thank you very much.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, next presentation, we have the Orange County Sheriff's Department again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lieutenant Patrick Rich again. This is our January 2019 Villa Park call for service activity and, Part 1 crime reporting. In the month of January in Villa Park, we had one reported residential burglary. That was off of Valley Drive. If you'll give me a moment on that, I'd like to discuss that later. And a few minutes later when I discuss significant events, because it is tied to a significant event in the city. There was one reported vehicle burglary. That was on January 30th. That was at the 17,000 block of Morrill Circle. And that was a purse taken out of a vehicle that was left unlocked overnight. There was a grand theft reported on January 1st, and that was the 10,000 block of Jerome Street. It was an elderly gentleman who had a new caretaker in his home, the one and only day that caretaker was there, and there was a significant amount, about $1,500 worth of cash and property stolen during that day. And there were two petty thefts. The first one being on 125, that was the 17,000 block of Santiago, where a wallet was taken from a purse from a lady while she was shopping in the shopping center. The credit cards were then immediately used to purchase items online before she realized they were missing. And on 121, at the 18,000 block of Durfee Circle, a gym bag was taken from an unlocked vehicle that was parked on the street during the day. Significant calls for service on 1:30 around midnight. Deputy Corrales, who we all met, contacted the occupants of an occupied vehicle, and the sole occupant, who was not from the city or around the area, was arrested for possession of stolen property for having outstanding warrants for theft and DUI. On 1-4, and this is the incident that I was talking about earlier, the burglary on Valley Drive, this was quite an intricate investigation, and without giving up too many details because it's still an ongoing court case behind this, deputies from our directed enforcement team were conducting a surveillance related to an ongoing burglary ring that they had identified in Orange County, North and South Orange County. They were following a group of 3 men believed to belong to this burglary ring throughout North Orange County, stopping at homes in Anaheim and Orange. They would go up to the doors, knock, and then leave. They were obviously up to no good and looking for the right home to target. When they arrived in Villa Park, they went to one residence, knocked on the door, left that residence. They went to the second residence, which was the home on Valley Drive. They then went in the backyard, and after they were in the backyard for about 30 seconds to a minute, the alarm went off. They ran from the location, got in their car, fled, and were detained by deputies, patrol deputies in the area. The deputies then went to the residence and noticed that someone had forced entry into the home. There was no loss. They didn't go into the home for very long, and they were not able to steal anything, but they did do some damage in basically shattering the rear slider to the residence. All 3 of those subjects were taken into custody and are currently being prosecuted by the Orange County District Attorney's Office. On 1/5, early Saturday morning, or the next day, Deputy Corrales, again, conducted a vehicle stop. He contacted multiple subjects who were driving through the city of Villa Park. And fortunately for them, after being lost on their way back from Pachanga to LA County where they lived, they ran into Deputy Corrales, and he was able to take most of them to jail for their warrants, their stolen property, their stolen personal identifying information, and their methamphetamine. And that is what I have to report for significant cases. The Sheriff's Department did respond to 382 calls for service during that time period. 255 of those calls were self-generated. Those are cases or incidents where the deputy conducted a stop, made a contact, whatever the case may be, and 127 assigned calls for service. That's a call that's generated by someone calling our dispatch and asking the deputy to come out and look at something or take a report for something. Traffic accidents, there were 4 reported during that time period. On 130, Villa Park High School parking lot, there was a non-injury traffic accident between students. On 114, the 1800 block of Taft, a light pole was struck by a vehicle. That was a hit-and-run collision. On 111, Wanda and Villa Park Road, there was another traffic accident reported. There were no injuries in that. That was 2 vehicles. And on New Year's Day, shortly after midnight, there was a vehicle at Villa Park and Lemon, solo vehicle into the center divider and into a tree. That was a very serious accident where the individual driving the vehicle had to be extricated by OCFA, had to come in and cut him out of the car. He was transported to a local hospital, and per the investigation done by our deputies at the scene, he did not appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs. There were also 24 citations issued, and, moving violation issued, and 13 parking citations for the month. That is all I have to report. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
The 385 calls, I think you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that higher or lower than normal?
That is about 10% higher than what we did in 2018 for the same time period. In 2018 and 2017 were fairly typical. A lot of those calls, as far as the calls for service, were the same as we had in 2017 and 2018. The increase, which was about 10%, was deputy-initiated activity and preventative patrol type stuff.
Anyone else on council? Thank you for what you do. Residents, community, staff, any questions? Thank you very much. Some outstanding law enforcement police work there. Well done.
And thank you, and it is truly a pleasure to, as I said before, and I mean it, work for this city where the council, the mayor, the city staff, and all the residents do support us, so it makes it much easier to do our job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Next, we have Orange County Fire Authority.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, David Harper, Battalion Chief, Orange County Fire Authority. Just talk about the last period for us. Lower number of calls. We had 33 calls for service within the city. The majority of those were medical aids again. As the lieutenant mentioned, we did have the one significant traffic accident. Some of what occurred over the last month that everybody was aware of is a little bit of the change with the weather is we had an uptick on calls for service calls related to the weather with some minor flooding in some areas and also with some wires down that we get with those storms. So just a reminder for the residents, we do have some more weather that's coming up with a big storm coming in this weekend, and we're not out of this season yet. It looks like we're going to have some more. So just to check your yard drains, check your rain gutters and that stuff, because once that water does start to rise in your house and you call us out, a lot of times it's too late for us to do as much as we can, but to try and mitigate that water. So as much as you can be proactive, that's great. Also a reminder that we do have sandbags available at Station 23 with sand. So if there's any residents that need that, come on over. That's free to all the residents. They can get that stuff set up before the rain does come in. And then just to tail in onto that presentation from Edison, just some assurance. Mayor Rosini, being a member of the board for OCFA, I'm sure you're aware that we do partner with Southern California Edison as they were talking about the vegetation mitigation. Our fire hand crew that we have, that's a majority of the work that they do on the off season when they're not fighting fires, is they're up in the hills around here and they're clearing that, making sure that all the fire roads are cleared. They're clearing around all those towers, making sure that we have clearance, and they're mitigating that risk. While a lot of that isn't in Villa Park specifically, as you mentioned, this is a wind corridor that comes right through here, and as we got from the canyon fire not too long ago, as the wind comes through here, it comes down that corridor, comes right through Santiago Oaks, and Villa Park is right in that trail. So we're being very proactive and working with Edison on that to make sure that we can mitigate that risk out there. And as they mentioned with those cameras, we have those up every day. There's actually a screen within our dispatch center that have those cameras looking at those hills every day, all the time, and that we can control those, just as he said, to be monitoring that for that fire risk. So at any time, if you guys have the opportunity and want to come up to our command center and our dispatch center, and you can see all that stuff and see the stuff that we're doing to mitigate that risk. That's all that I have. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Chief Harper, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Villa Park Library Representative, I believe she's under the weather and absent. Okay. Now we have individual council member meeting attendance reports. Let's begin with the Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District. Do we have anything from former council member Nelson? Steve? Okay.
Are we gonna, excuse me? I believe we asked that he provide a report and/or give it.
I did express that and then shared that with the former councilman, and he basically indicated that he did not intend to do so.
Next,
Nice.
Orange County Sanitation District.
Okay, I attended the Orange County Sanitation District Board meeting on January 23rd and the Operations Committee meeting on February 6th. And at these meetings, routine operations and maintenance items were reviewed and approved. Subsequent to the February 6th meeting of the Operations Committee, I was, if you recall, last meeting, council meeting, I announced that I was had been named as the vice chairman for the Operations Committee, and then subsequent to the February 6th Operations Committee meeting, I was then appointed to be the chairman of the Operations Committee. And what this means for Villa Park is that I can more effectively represent our city and our interests at the sanitation district, and work with other elected officials from 20 cities, 4 special districts in the county of Orange, again to promote our interests. The sanitation district treats all of the wastewater produced by the city's operated or the city-operated sanitary sewer system, treats that wastewater, and produces environmental benefits. It recycles the water through the groundwater recycling system in concert with the Orange County Water District. They also produce biosolids, which are provided to grow crops. And they also generate methane, which they use to generate electricity to operate the treatment plant. So anyway, the Operations Committee is very much involved in overseeing these operations. On On February 20th, I then participated in my first activity as chairman of the operations committee by participating in the new board member operations or new board member orientation. And more than 25 board members, alternates, and staff attended this. That's my report.
I'd like to thank you for your leadership with the Orange County Sanitation District. I think it should be known to our community and our council members and staff that Mayor David Shaver from Stanton was extremely complimentary of your participation. A lot of elected officials are appointed to committees, countywide committees, and they attend, and they, to a limited degree, participate. But few offer significant, meaningful bits of discussion. And that is something that Councilmember Collicott, given his expertise, his preparedness, and his background, really has stepped up. And it's a real boon for a city the size of Villa Park to have somebody in an influential position. And I just want to thank you and congratulate you on that.
Well, thank you. The last time Villa Park had a member of our city council get this or be at this level of leadership on the sanitation district board was when Councilman Nguyen represented our city between 1971 and 1974, so almost 50 years.
Well, keep up the good work and thank you. Next, we have Orange County Fire Authority. That's mine. On January 24th, 2019, I attended the regular meeting of the Orange County Fire Authority on behalf of our city. Among other items, the board reviewed the mid-year financial report for the Fire Authority. Overall, the OCFA, as it's known, financials looked very, very positive, despite slowing housing sales. Overall, the economy seemed to be doing well in Orange County, again, despite housing. And as such, the Fire Authority itself was in a positive position. After reviewing the reports, the board directed staff to return in March with proposed budget adjustments, and that was more or less the meat and potatoes of the agenda. There's some other items which you can find in the minutes to the Fire Authority, but that's the more significant aspect of it. On February 5th, 2019, I attended the Human Resources Committee for the Orange County Fire Authority. This is a subcommittee of the Fire Authority, and at this time, I was nominated and selected to be the vice chair of the Human Resources Committee. Personally, I'm extremely thankful for the trust that my colleagues have for me as it pertains to the Fire Authority and my public safety background. And obviously the OCFA partner cities and OCFA personnel. It's an honor to be there. Sometimes it's a challenge to juggle work and family, but I think it's a very, very important committee, and I'm happy to participate in the leadership of that. That's all I have for that. Orange County Library Advisory Board.
So no meeting.
Okay. City Schools Advisory.
So the City Schools Advisory Committee met on February 11th. Scott Harvey gave a presentation about the construction that's going on with the schools. They talked about DSA approval for Villa Park happening in August, and then them also working with the city on the traffic flow. They were very complimentary about their interaction with the city. They talked about the current work. They put in a couple of portable buildings as they are ramping up to start the construction. Those went in February 15th through 18th. They're going to move the students April 1st through April 8th. That's their spring break. And the science building is still expected to complete in November 2020. They talked briefly about the Villa Park fields, the construction that they did to put in the new field there and the track. They did express some concern about some pet activity on the track and then on the field itself after they just put it in. And I guess I wanted to take the opportunity to say that this is in Villa Park, an area that we have treasured having the ability to walk over at the high school, to walk the track, to be on the field. We have a brand new field. And I think the intention for us as a city and for the school is for us to be partners on that, to take ownership, not literally, but as good citizens to take care of that and to be good partners with the schools in that area. So we had a very brief conversation about that, and the schools would like to work with us on making sure that both Villa Park and the high school enjoy that track for a very long time.
Is the track open now?
So it is not open. So they actually have put a fence up physically around the field itself from now until September. They've got some ADA compliance stuff that they're working on, and they're hoping that by the end of September that will be open. Sorry, you were on my next point, so it was good.
Sorry.
No, good segue. The last thing that we talked about was the Fred Kelly Stadium work that's scheduled to reopen in April 2020. They talked briefly about some stuff like moving the Villa Park High School graduation, or moving their other graduation ceremonies that were held at Fred Kelly to Angel Stadium. They have some other activities, the 4th of July, the 3rd of July stuff, sorry, that's going to be at that's Grijalva. And then some future activities that I didn't have specific dates on. So that's my report for that.
Thanks for your report. Any questions? Community development? Bob, do you have community development?
Oh, that's right. I'm the chairman. I wasn't.
I wasn't sure if you or Crystal were.
Wasn't sure. Okay. Yeah, we had a meeting of the community development committee, and we discussed one item that's on our agenda today for later on today.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your report. Next, Friends of the Villa Park Library.
Friends of the Villa Park Library met on February 7th. Bill Baker was the presiding manager of that meeting. Went very smoothly. We talked briefly with Shauna Bird, the new librarian, talked about some fundraising efforts for the Friends of the Villa Park. I wanted to point out, I wasn't aware of this, but you can actually go to friendsofthevillaparklibrary.org and you can sign up to be a friend or contribute right there on the website. So that's the extent of my report for that.
Great organization. They do some fantastic work. Thank you very much for attending and reporting on that. Infrastructure Management Advisory Committee.
No meeting.
Investment Advisory Committee.
No meeting.
Law Enforcement Advisory. That's mine. On February 25th, 2019, I attended the Law Enforcement Advisory Committee, which was yesterday. On our council's behalf, among other items, we selected a chair, a new chair, and a new vice chair. John Whitman was our prior chair and provided a number of years of service to our community and to the committee, and he should be commended for that period of time, and I'd like to have him back and recognize him for that. And he was our last chair. Eric Reynolds, longtime Villa Park resident, overall great guy, and fellow Villa Park Little League participant, will be serving as the chairman of the committee for this year. Jay Wasserman, in absentia, will be serving, who was voted in absentia, will be serving in as vice chair. Both have provided tremendous amounts of contribution to our community and some wonderful ideas since the origins of the LEAC, and I think it's long overdue that they are recognized and given the opportunity to have leadership on that, and I'm so thankful that the members of the LEAC voted them in. And that's all I have. Next is Villa Park Community Services Foundation.
Yes, we met on January the 23rd. There were several items on the docket for business. One being that we approved the 2019 budget for this year coming up. Also, Ed Carter's been very, very busy in trying to seat new board members. I believe one new board member potential is on the agenda for our vote tonight. Excited about that, and we're trying to fill 2 other positions with some esteemed folks from Villa Park, the Krutzingers, and hopefully tomorrow night we'll convince them to sit on the board as well. So we look forward to that. So that's it.
All right. Public comments. Any committee reports that I forgot? Anyone? All right. Public comments. Mayor, at this time, Members of the public may address the council on any off-agenda items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council, provided that no action may be taken on off-agenda items unless authorized by law. Opportunities will be also provided for public comment on each item. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person and 30 minutes for all comments. Steve, do we have any?
But there may be somebody here that has to speak.
I believe that lady there says she's.
And please come forward. Give us your name and your address, please.
Mr. Mayor,
No, I think you're wanting to talk about the
I
item.
want to talk about my, the pine trees.
That'll come up later as a separate agenda item, so.
Okay, because you told me I was going to be number one, and I come in and I haven't been well. And
Okay.
I've put through all this meeting, and I'm wondering if I was ever on your list.
You're on the list.
Okay. I'll stick it out.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate your patience. Let's move on to public hearings. Now we will move on to our agendized public hearings. Our first hearing is the review to waive reading in full of all ordinances and resolutions on the agenda. I'll now open the hearing. Staff, please give the staff report.
This is the monthly effort we make. It's actually not relevant this month because we don't have any ordinances, resolutions, but in essence, we do have minutes. So this is just an effort to expedite the movement of the meetings so we don't read them out in full and recommend approval.
Any questions? Anyone to speak? Council members?
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay.
Second.
I will now close the public hearing. Steve, let's go ahead and vote.
Passes 5-0.
Now we will consider our consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered routine and are usually enacted by one motion approving the recommended action listed on the agenda. Any member of the city council, staff, or the public may request an item be removed from the consent calendar for discussion or separate action. Council members, are there any items you would like to remove from the consent calendar?
Number 13.
13. So noted. Steve, please note 13. Anyone from the public? Staff? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the remainder?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote.
Passes by a 5-0 vote.
All right, next we will consider item 13 of the consent calendar.
The reason I asked Steve is just for a procedural question with regards to the completion notice.
Yes.
The work was completed based on the documentation I saw back in October.
Right.
Was there any reason why it took till February to actually sign off on this project?
I believe, and Akram can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we settled with the contractor with regards to any final change orders or anything that we allow a certain amount of time. So the work may be completed, we certify the work, and then there's a reconciliation with the contractor regarding work and costs.
Because sometimes, payments, final payments, retention and things like that are held. And I didn't know if that would impact the contractor in any negative way, shape, or form.
Not at this point, no. It's all been in consultation with the contractor.
Okay, all right.
So it's just, at this point, we're moving forward. We've resolved all issues. We are pleased to report that we're under budget and in time.
But is it typical to go this long?
It depends on the contractor.
Okay.
You'll recall that Taft Avenue was a long time resolved after that, after the work was done. But there was a long time on the reconciliation with costs and the final change order payments.
Okay.
So we do withhold payments, but that's something so it's incentivized for the contractor to move forward in an expeditious manner.
Okay, because it's just, I didn't want to penalize,
Point taken.
That's all. Move this be approved.
Second. All right, go ahead and vote. Item 13.
Passes by a 5-0 vote.
Let's move on to new business. Our first item of new business is the request to remove trees abutting Villa Park Road at the address of 10482 Frederick Drive. Staff, please give the, Steve, please give the staff report, or Akram.
This is actually a request that came in November, and it was subsequently transferred to the Community Development Committee by the owner, Ms. Dorothy Ferry. The property is located at 10482 Frederick Drive. She has 5, and you recall, Frederick Drive abuts Villa Park Road, and she has 6, I believe 6 pine trees that are along her yard. And those the city has maintained for years, and they drop pine needles and pine cones and on her property and create a mess. So she requested, as pursuant to our ordinance, and she came to us and said she would like to. Nothing can be removed or pruned or without council approval along certain streets, being Center Drive, Villa Park Road, Taft, et cetera, some of the main thoroughfares, and that's by ordinance. These trees she requested that they be pruned or removed, and I believe she requested potentially some financial assistance to the extent that she could have. So by process, the appropriate committee, the ordinance says the appropriate committee shall review it. The CDC did review it at their last meeting, and they recommended that it come forward to the full council, and no action can be taken until the full council makes a decision on that. The owner is here to speak on the matter herself, so I would defer any specific responses to.
Ma'am, if you'd provide us with your name, it sounds like we have your address. Thank you.
I've lived at my address for 45 years, so the trees were small when I moved in. And now that I'm older, it's very difficult to get rid of all the debris that comes from them. They do trim them every year, but it's usually too late. And I've just had my pool redone, and it was green within 2 weeks after we had the first winds. So it's a real big mess, and it takes more than just the gardener to do it. It takes me, it takes my kids to come over and do it. They're just too big now. So they either need to be cut back really close, especially the ones by the pool, or they need to be taken down and something else put there. They're just really, really messy trees.
Thank you. Do you have anything further?
I had pictures I showed the other council people. If you are interested, if you're not, that's okay too.
Okay.
Okay?
Do we have those photos?
I believe they were on your phone, or I'm not sure.
I actually
We
visited,
didn't give.
I looked
I
at
don't believe we kept.
I've
the
been to the
pictures.
site.
I don't think we kept.
I don't understand what you're saying.
The pictures
I
that
have
you
them
brought.
on here.
Oh, she has them on her
Yeah,
phone, that's
I
what I'm
have
saying,
them
so
on
we
there.
don't have
Alright.
pictures that
Okay.
No.
that I have in my
I
possession.
think most of us have. I've been to the site. I think you've been to the
I've been to
site.
the site and looked at the trees.
Available on Google Earth. It's pretty obvious what we're referring to. If anybody has any concerns.
Have we consulted a arborist or anything to determine what can be done about the trees?
You'll come across the dog. But
To help
a lot
her?
of the stuff is in my other trees too. But when you get to the pool, you'll see that it turned it green, and I had just had it, redone. I was really upset with that.
Mayor Pro Tem, in response to the trees have been reviewed, they are healthy, we prune them once a year, consistent with the schedule we do with all the trees in Villa Park. I believe she's concerned that is not sufficient amount of time to.
I had to get another barrel to get the pine needles up. And then it's just, as soon as the wind's come again, more comes down. It's a never-ending thing right now. When they were smaller, it was easy.
And what would you like for us to do?
Well, either cut them back or get rid of them, least the ones by the pool, and then put something else in.
If we prune back the limbs or whatever, does that impact the life of the tree?
I've seen them, thank you.
There is some, how far you can prune them back is an issue, but they're healthy trees at this point, so removal would not be something we would typically do.
No, I don't want to remove them. I'm just asking if we cut back the limbs so that to a certain distance or whatever, does that impact the life of the tree?
I'm not an arborist or certified arborist, but I could say that if you prune them back any tree too far, you're going to have a negative impact on it. You would. We do it once a year. You could do it more often, but I don't know how often would be considered enough to mitigate the problem.
Summer, there's no problem because you don't have that heavy winds. But as soon as it turns into fall, then you have a mess.
There is a timing issue that the arborists have told us, certain times of the year they would like us to prune it as opposed to other times, so.
Probably in the colder months.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Dormant
So
months.
we don't, so in the drier months, they typically don't prune. And that's would be why she sees it in the fall, and we typically have the winds in the fall. So they do it, they don't go out and prune during the windy time, they typically will wait till after that.
Was
So
there a recommendation?
She's
from the
accurate
C-
per trail.
Was there a recommendation from the CDC?
There was.
There is a recommendation to trim the trees.
Okay.
Can I make a comment? I just want to commend you for actually really just being a good citizen and handling it the proper way and coming to the city and, you know, presenting it to the CDC and, you know, even though maybe the recommendation, irrespective of how the vote goes, you've just been really great through the whole process, and I just want to say thank you for really being a great citizen about it.
So I think what we, in talking to the arborist, if we were to prune it back, the one time a year, it probably would not be sufficient to remove the problem that she's complaining of. And I think she'd agree with us on that. One time a year is not, that's what we do our regular schedule of all our trees in Villa Park. If the council wants to direct that we do a different schedule for that or pruning, we could certainly prune it, direct them to prune it back a little bit more at that one time.
As long as we don't kill them.
Well, I know, but that is probably not going to resolve the problem that she has because we do it on a once a year schedule. So we would have to alter our schedule for that, and that would be a council decision.
Well, I have two questions. One I think you just answered, which is it really going to affect the pine needles dropping into her pool if it's done at the times that the arborist would recommend, and it sounds like no. And the second one is what would be the cost of the additional pruning? What are we looking at?
I don't have a cost of additional pruning. I can tell you to remove the trees are about $8,000 with the stump.
Between $4,800 and $8,000.
I just,
And about $1,400 to trim them back. That was with Brewitt. I had called them and asked them for a bid.
And do we have problems with other neighbors or other up and down the street there with the same problem?
we get questions regarding Taft Avenue, pine trees, et cetera. There are, you know, there's, anywhere you have pine trees, they're gonna drop needles, and they're dropping pine cones.
Well,
So,
I've got the same problem in my yard with
Me too.
avocado trees and everything else dumping in the pool.
so we do have that problem all through. So we have a schedule that we maintain right now that's recommended by the arborist. It's a once a year, and we prune them and do that there. So, but again, it's the council's decision. If they want to alter it, they can alter that schedule. It's a call. We do what we believe is the minimum pruning required to keep them healthy. So anything further would be something that the council would have to so direct us.
Any other member of the community want to speak on this matter? Any other questions, council?
I have a question, but the pine, you know, I've been in Villa Park for almost 40 years now, and that, you know, I've seen the trees grow up. We have pine trees lining Villa Park Road from Wanda all the way to Lemon Street. So it's an intentional design, landscaping design that we have in our community. And we have, just like with on Taft, we have additional pine trees, and they have, you know, there are pine trees even in the median. I guess back in the 1970s, pine trees were a big item. We also have some of our neighborhoods that are lined with palm trees, Mexican palm trees, and we have received some complaints on those as well, where they drop fronds. Frankly, it's hard to imagine any kind of a tree that's not going to result in some litter, whether it's bark litter, leaves, pine needles, palm fronds, or if you get into ficus trees, you're going to have invasive roots. You know, choose which problem you want to deal with, but to not have trees creates a very sterile, unpleasing atmosphere, and we do need the landscaping. So whatever we decide, I would like to see us retain the trees, not remove them piecemeal in any fashion, and try to keep them looking as good as they can because, you know, Villa Park Road is the main thoroughfare through our city.
I have a question.
Please.
Does our arborist give any guidance about when trees get to a certain height, bringing them back down, or doing any sort of, is there a long-term plan, or are we just planning to let them grow forever? Is there a,
We generally don't remove trees until they are diseased or something.
I'm not saying remove. What I'm talking about is in terms of height?
Topping.
Topping.
They don't top pine
Okay.
trees, typically. And those trees have not been topped in years, if you go see them, all through Villa Park. And I think Councilman Colacott mentioned, they were planted, I believe, as probably part of the landscaping
When they built the,
design or whatever in the city. So you have them, and then it was adopted through ordinance to specifically address those primary streets that have them. So you have to believe, not being here, you have to believe that was sort of the idea, the intention was to have certain things in the landscaping plan for the city. But they don't typically top those types of trees, and that can be a health issue if you do. You can affect their health. So we prune with the advice of the arborist and say we do it consistent with all the pine trees in the city on a regular schedule.
Great.
So again, that's sort of the council's decision, what they want to address that schedule. If we, we certainly can alter things, but we do right now, I'll be very candid, we do the minimum, and we do what they recommend to keep them healthy. And if they're diseased or whatever, we do remove them.
But as I understand it, even if we did more than the minimum, that still may not, within the parameters of the dormant growth period, which is the cool months, when you're supposed to cut those types of trees or prune or whatever, that's not necessarily going to affect.
I believe the trees are probably at such a height and they're so large that I don't know that you're going to, unless you maintain a more active schedule, then it's going to be more than twice a year. You're going to have to prune them to probably deal with the problem if that's.
I don't have trouble in the summer, it's okay, but come the fall.
As they
Can I make a recommendation then that we, I think we all want to keep the trees. Can I make a recommendation that we maybe try for this next, this next cycle for the winter months, do a little more aggressive one-time trimming of those trees and see how it responds and see if it diminishes at least the bulk. You're going to get the needles, but maybe you won't get 2 barrels. Maybe you'll only get 1 barrel. But at least that way we can see if perhaps a more aggressive. My fear is if we go ahead and say, let's go ahead and trim you twice, then your neighbors and their neighbors, and now we're setting a precedent and incurring an expense. But since we're going to have to be up there and trim them anyways, maybe we could just do a little bit more aggressive and see how it responds.
I think
They start a little bit earlier because they were after the winds.
I think they have to do it then, though. That's one of the issues. It's the time of year. It has to be a cooler month.
They don't want to
Exactly.
do it during the dry
Right.
months of the year when they go up and prune them because of the.
The only caveat I think we should consider, and I'm supportive of your motion, and I'm happy to second it, is that with the buy-off of our arborist, that
Absolutely.
I don't want to go anything outside of professional
yeah.
standards on that.
I agree.
So just for
So-
clarification, by aggressive, maintaining once a year or and pruning them more at that one time?
Pruning them more at that
a
one
little
time.
bit more.
Could I, sorry, I didn't know how to interrupt. I didn't want to step over you.
Okay.
As an alternative solution, if the problem really is about cleanup, if there was some way to assist in cleaning that up, and I'm not suggesting that necessarily that the city do it, but that there are organizations that might be willing to help to clean up or to volunteer. That might be an alternative to damaging the trees or to causing some problem with stuff that I know I'd like to see continue grow. If we just concentrated on the actual problem, which is the cleanup, and thought about working with somebody who might be willing to come help out, would that be another alternative that would solve the problem?
That sounds good, except for one thing. When everything gets in my pool, it makes my pool green. And that's, I haven't figured out how to keep it out of there.
So timing would be key in order to make sure it was cleaned up before it, or as it was being accumulated. Sure.
Lots of kids need community service hours.
Lots of kids need community service hours.
Yeah, we have service organizations that have assisted other seniors in cleaning up their property and dealing with such issues. I have a similar problem with pine needles falling in my pool, and my solution.
Mine turned green. I mean, it was.
I get 'em out there.
Done, and I was amazed that it could be green so fast.
How
Yeah,
quickly were
get
they
out there right
removed?
away.
Is there a cover you could buy for the pool?
I'm sorry.
A cover for the pool?
Yeah.
You know what? Because it's
Two-tiered,
high on
right?
one end
Two-
and
yeah,
low on
it's
the other,
two-tiered.
you can't put a thing over it because the winds will pick it up and take it to somebody else's yard. So I've looked into that too.
Make a motion?
So we have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and vote.
Sorry, could you clarify the motion, please?
Steve or Crystal, if you want.
The motion, I move to make a motion of more aggressively trimming the trees at the appropriate time with the blessing of an arborist.
So more aggressively on the current schedule or
Correct.
all trees?
Correct.
On the current schedule?
Not an additional expense, not an additional period of time of trimming.
Okay,
Because I just don't think that's,
okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't think that's your
You're correct.
Okay. Motion and a second. Close the vote, or, excuse me, close the discussion. Please vote.
Passes by a 4-to-1 vote with Councilman Zimmerman voting no.
Thank you.
This next item, I have a personal conflict that I'm going to need to recuse myself from any discussion on this. So as such, I'm going to need you to lead the discussion on item number 15. I'm going to go ahead and leave the room, just out of per FPPC guidelines, because part of this is within 500 feet of my home, and out of an abundance of caution and respect for the law. Excuse me.
Okay. Steve, you want to give the report?
Sure. Thank you. Item number 15 is proposed change orders for the street rehabilitation project. Specifically, the contract is with RJ Noble. The two change orders, the first change order involves the inclusion of Sycamore Street from Santiago to Taft Avenue. The second is to slurry, item 2 on that same change order is to slurry seal, complete the slurry seal basically of Parker Larson, which you recall was previously partially done with the utilities when they did some work there. Item number 3 was some crack sealing on various streets. With the change order number 1 is approximately $128,000. The actual cost gets determined by quantity, the actual quantities of the use. Change order number 2 was to address some additional issues we're dealing with on Valley, and that includes the Valley Avenue redoing. That includes putting ADA curb ramps on the Valley Drive and Saravilla Drive. You'll see that with the dimples there on the corners. Constructing a retaining block wall on the one side, moving it back, and on the south side of the street, and completing the balance of the street on both sides with cement, swales, and basically swales along the balance gutters down the balance of the street. The previous version had, we had included asphalt, berm, swales, and discussing that, and Akram and I sort of pushed on him on there and said that, you know, the cement would hold the asphalt longer and we would have a longer bang for our buck and that type of thing. So to go along the continual street, as you bend anywhere, you see asphalt starts to deteriorate quicker than cement will. So we'll have a much longer life expectancy of the street. So those two change orders, that second one is $95,000. We have in our budget $112,000 approximately contingency, which we could have absorbed, but since this is the large nature of this project and the very high visibility, we could have absorbed all but $100,000 within the current project. I wanted to bring this forward to make sure that the council was aware of the work that we're doing in the city on this project. And I would report too that originally we would have hoped that the work would have been done by this time, but as the wet winters that we've had has delayed us, you can't do the work, and I've sort of come to realize, how dependent we are on the weather. We lose a whole week with a couple days worth of storms, even though you lose a whole week. So we are probably 3 to 4 weeks, Akram, behind on our
Yes.
schedule.
So we're about 4 weeks behind.
And that would be a natural.
Are we advertising that to our public to
Yes,
help them
yes, we
understand?
are. We have that on our website. We don't have the specific the date yet, because every time we start to come up with a date, we get a new storm rolling in. So this weekend we'll have a storm, and it happens this weekend. It will affect our ability to start work next week. So it is, you'll see a lot of work being done that has been done, but we can't complete. It will move very quickly once the weather clears, but I can't guarantee weather, and I don't have any contacts that can change the weather.
Okay. Any questions from the council?
I'd just like to clarify, this is all on your street repairs plan, your guidelines for what?
Yes.
And this is just in line with that plan? This is the next step that you're taking that's?
Yeah, the next step, and yes, we're consistent with what needs to be done for the city.
Great.
Any other questions, comments? Anyone from the member of the public that'd like to address this item? Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
A second?
Okay, moving second. Let's vote.
Passes by a 4-0 vote with 401, I guess, with Mayor Rossini recusing himself. So,
Thank you, sir. Next, we're on to item 16, the electric vehicle charging station. Staff, please give the staff report.
okay, in 2016, the council discussed and decided at that time not to explore the feasibility of installing the electric charging vehicles, and he did that on a 3-2 vote. Since that time, there are a number of things have changed, and I wanted to bring this back to get council direction one way or another, because circumstances have changed. One, you see a lot more electric vehicles on the road, being much more affordable. In the past, you had certainly maybe one brand or whatever. You saw the Priuses were pretty much dominating the market. Now you have Tesla, Volts, almost all the automaker makers are coming out with some sort of vehicle, and they are much more prevalent throughout the city of Villa Park. That being said, the AQMD, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and Southern California Edison are now offering funding and grant opportunities. This is something that has grown, sort of they're encouraging it. The reason this is important is because the city itself probably does not have property that's appropriate for an electric charging station that would be accessible, that we would be able to give, particularly be given the fact that there may be a community center on our current public yard. So it would have to be located on private property. However, the city, as the municipal entity, has to apply for these grants, so it would have to be a public-private partnership. I don't want to explore even having that conversation unless the council is so inclined or interested in doing so. So this property here would be the most logical in the town center. I believe in the past there was some interest by one of the landowners, but that moment has come and gone, so I don't believe by the Dunkin' Donuts, I don't believe they're probably interested at this point because of the parking situation and whatnot. But it does not mean that all the owners haven't pursued it, or interested in it. There's some funding opportunities that would exist. This is an issue that is entirely a policy issue, but one of those things I'm going to seek council direction before I exert any more effort on researching the matter. So at this point, I'm simply asking, do you want me to research? There's no commitment, but there would be a staff commitment of resources if you were to say, let's go look at it, because I would have to consult with the landowners, and I'd have to find out if there's interest, and how do they, is this a revenue generating opportunity, and all those kinds of questions that you probably are racing through your mind right now are questions that would have to be researched and would take some time for me and my staff to go ahead and pursue that. But given the fact that it would consume some of our resources, I'm not going to do it without you guys telling me to do it. So I would defer to you.
Can I ask a procedural question?
Yes, sir.
I am an owner of an electric vehicle that requires a plug-in. Do I need to excuse myself from this?
No, you're fine.
We have anybody that'd like to speak about this? And any member of council?
Just a comment. I believe that we have quite a few priorities for 2019 that, and even some things that have gone unfinished from the past that we need to address, I think are more important than this particular item for now, especially since we are going to tie up staff time to go, I mean, write grants and do all these different, and the research and so forth and so on. I would say that they've got other things, other priorities, I think they would take precedence over this one, just my opinion.
If I may. So the opportunity to get in on the grants that are offered is something that we may miss if we don't take advantage of this and look into it now. It's possible that we would get another opportunity at this sometime in the future, but these are programs that are being utilized by other cities and by other agencies. They're applying for them, getting them, and it gets the progress made now when it's becoming relevant. So it becomes important to do this in a more expedient fashion, to look into it right away. And I'm very much in favor of at least having the conversations and having more information to see if that's something that we could do in Villa Park.
Can I add a comment? I don't, I like data, and I think I'd like to learn more and see how it could benefit our city and see what the ROI is on it, and you know, what the bottom line number is.
Is this something that an intern could research for us?
It will be, but I mean, candidly, I'm not going to ask the intern to talk to the property owners.
Understood.
That's
But I
something
mean,
that's
to
gonna
find
evolve.
out what the grant opportunities are and find out what the potential cost might be to our city to implement something like this?
It would probably take several of us to do on various, there's a lot of questions we all would have, and even some questions of our city attorney, because if we're going to have a public-private partnership, there would have to be some, what does an MOU entail? So they're probably, you're correct, an intern could do a lot of the fact-finding, but a lot of the other research maybe would require some of us at another level. So probably a team effort, if you will.
Is there any mandate for the city to do something like this?
No, not at this time. Not that we're aware of.
There's only mandates if the city builds public parking facilities, X number of spaces under the, I think they call it the Green Building Code, under which most construction is now implemented, has certain requirements. These grants, it's fairly formulaic through Air Quality Management District. Other cities have got, in Yorba Linda, we just put some in our new parking structure. That's not the hard part. The hard part is this parking area. I mean, there are 8, I think, property owners that own this
More than that,
area.
try 12.
Is it 12? You know, and the parking area is a massive reciprocal access and parking easement. So you have to get a bunch of consents, and that's really where the time comes in.
And it's a little premature, but your comment about there's mandates only if you build public parking, just, you know, in the future, if we were able to build a community center, is there a minimum number of spaces in a parking structure for you to be required to have that? Is it 30 spaces, 5 spaces, 10 spaces?
Very good question. I don't know that number off the top of my head. I think for the community center, it wouldn't, I mean, we're not building a public parking facility. There may be parking spaces required as part of the overall construction, just for the square footage under the building code. But I don't think that would trigger, under my current understanding of the code, actual dedicated spaces for electronic charging stations, right? And there's different requirements. I mean, sometimes, some you have to put in charging stations. There are certain X amount of spaces you have to make available just for electric vehicles now under the Green Building Code. It's, well, I guess it depends whether you have an electric vehicle or not, but it's quite depressing if you go into a lot of public parking spaces now, like the new one in Bray and like in Yorba Linda we just built. We have to dedicate a whole, almost the first floor to electric vehicle spaces. So those requirements are sort of fast moving and changing. So it's definitely the cutting edge of where we're going.
Well, it sure would be nice to make an informed decision if we were going to make a
I guess
decision
the
at all.
question to all of us is, what's the benefit to Villa Park?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a 220 plug in my house. I'm not going to drive my car down here and pay someone to plug my car in. So what's the benefit to Villa Park for putting these charging stations in? Other than maybe benefit to the owners who are charging us to plug our car in?
Well, and there is usually these facilities come with a, there's a couple of companies, you put in your credit card and you buy, it's not free electricity.
Yeah.
And there's a
So
management
somebody's gonna
contract
pay.
that comes with that, yeah.
So what's, once again, do we know or do we understand what the benefit is to Villa Park? We're gonna vote on this?
I think that's an excellent question. I think that, it would appear to me that the primary beneficiaries would be the merchants. There'd be, some additional feature that they could offer customers if they came down to do their shopping. They could charge up their cars while they're shopping. But I'm not sure that it's a general benefit to the city of Villa Park or the general benefit to the residents.
I think it would be an amenity that we could
It'd be
use
an
to help.
amenity to the for the merchants.
Well, but also if you're someone looking to move into the community, you might want to know, does it offer that as a service? I don't own an electric vehicle.
I don't own an electric vehicle, but I'm concerned about both sides of this. Sounds like coin. One, that there would be a disproportionate amount of staff time put towards this project that wouldn't necessarily benefit the vast majority of Villa Park residents. But then the flip side is, are we looking at it too narrowly? Are we looking at it too short-sighted? Is this something that down the road is going to quickly become more of the norm and the expectation for businesses, and will it be a detriment if not there? And also, is there a financial vehicle where the costs are offset by revenue generation so that the city is not out any sort of financial, obviously there's grants that are available, but do the grants satisfy all of the costs and upkeep, maintenance, so on and so forth? I have some thoughts about,
To answer all those questions, they have to go do the research.
Yeah.
I think we all have questions that we're looking to find answers to, and the idea is that our city staff needs to be directed so we can find those. I believe the value to the city and to its residents is pretty significant. I think that you put something in that is looking towards the future. You help not only our small city center with something that's advanced and what's coming in the future, but it also may offer revenue generating opportunities down the line. If we're doing it in partnership with the merchants or with the landowners, perhaps there's some way that the city is even able to benefit to share in the revenue from that. It seems like there are a lot of there's opportunity here that we may be missing if we don't even look into it.
Yeah, I was wondering if the grants may disappear in the future.
The one thing I would say too, and Councilman Colacott, is to the extent of the health of the town center, while it's not a driver in our revenue, we do get sales tax from the center. So to the extent that you have healthy businesses and healthy retail town center, that's a boon to the city, and it keeps our business operating here. This is one of the highest producing revenue generator, the Ralph's is, in the whole Ralph's chain. And to the extent that there are things that could keep that healthy, I'm interested in keeping this town center merchant healthy, if you will, or retail healthy. So that's, I don't know what that entails, if this maybe doesn't, or I don't know. But I just would offer that there is some benefit to the health of the entire community to have this town center healthy.
Perhaps Ralph is, they've got a number of stores all over Southern California. Maybe they've already been down this road before and can give us some information up front before we spend our staff time.
Can I make a suggestion then? If you want to ask staff to do something, why don't we just go over and ask the owners if they're interested in this and if they have long-term visions for this? And if they're not, then why waste our time on it?
Exactly.
Okay, then I make a motion that we direct city staff to inquire to the property owners if they would even be interested.
I'm going to second that.
Can I? Okay. Yep.
Any further discussion or comments? Chad, did you have something to add?
I guess it's a good first step. I hate to, it's a step, and a step is better than no step at all. So
Well, Councilman, I mean, is there, like I said, I just went through this in Yorba Linda. I'll get Steve. It won't take me any time. The Air Quality Management District grant funding stuff, that's straightforward.
We've actually,
Yeah.
there's an allocated amount, it's formulaic. The
Yeah.
Edison is the more competitive type of grant that we would have to apply for. And there's some questions, and then the revenue generation opportunities are something candidly, I would not want to go into this if there were no benefits. Like if we could share in the revenue
Yeah.
for the city, then yay, but
I
that's.
can't imagine that we would have that many stations that would generate a substantial amount of revenue for any of our property owners or for the city.
Well, I just know that a cell tower, for instance, can generate $20,000 to $30,000 a year.
True.
So
That's big.
I don't know what these generate. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know what the market is, and there's a lot of questions, like you said, we just don't know.
All right,
Do you
I think the
feel-
idea is that there's going to be a demand for more and more of these, and that you might do one or two now, and might not bring in anything, but if we have started down that, anyway.
I
The
have one,
biggest, I'm sorry.
go ahead, sir.
I apologize, Mayor. The biggest debate we had, apparently, I'm told this, the Tesla plugs are different than other plugs. So
It's an adapter.
Yeah, okay. So like how many types of one versus the other do you get?
It's really easy.
Okay, that's.
I have one last question of Steve. Do you feel that this is going to disproportionately burden staff such that you can't accomplish some of our prior priorities?
No, as far as just, if the direction is just to simply contact the owners at this time, it's not, that's a very simple
That's-
process. If
'cause
that's the request. If it's to go the full, step 2 through 10, it's going to take more work. But
I respect
right now, I'm
Councilman-
not getting that direction.
Excuse
from
me,
you.
Mayor Pro Tem Pitts' concern, and I want that on the record. So, thank you.
So I think my direction at this point would be from the council, just to contact the property owners and to report back to the council as another piece of information for you guys to decide where you want, if there is another step or not.
It's very likely that there's other individuals, Todd, having worked with one of these, other individuals that have gone through this, and that the next step to find that person and get all that information, it requires that our city staff wouldn't need to go out and reinvent the wheel. They could just contact somebody like Kelly, who was here earlier, who's looking at that new Charge to Go program for Southern California. They just did, I think, 38, and now they're doing like 400 more of them. And so they already have that information. I think it's a matter of coming in and giving a short little presentation and getting you to the next step.
Unless there's any further comment, I'm going to go ahead and ask us to take a vote.
That passes by a 5-0 vote.
Thank you. Next item is the city manager report.
Okay. Item number 17. Item number 17, you'll see, and Councilman Pitts Mayor Pro Tem Pitts has indicated, well, my goal is to get as many of these in the, I guess it's olive green in the way the copier is doing this, but for me, but try and get as many of these things completed as I can and narrow down. We have a lot of items on the list that have continued, and I'd like to remove those and move those forward. So there's a concerted effort on my part to get those done. The item is red where there are new changes. Although not on the report, I would like to report that, and I think I sent you out an email, that the city of Villa Park received a Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for our fiscal year 18-19 award, 19 from the Government Finance Officers Association. This is the highest award that you can get for budget presentation, and the city has received this since every year since 2012. So despite the change in staff and finance, we've had some really excellent effort by both Tui Cure and Frank Davies. So in the last couple of years, while they've transitioned in, they have not lowered the quality of the work that's being done in the eyes of those people who evaluate, who are finance professionals. So these are highly critical. You have to meet, I want to say there's like 14 different specific criteria that they judge you. So I'm really proud of the fact we have that. And you can see a plaque in Frank's office that has the buttons for each year. But I just wanted to mention that because that's something that's worthy of note, and it is something that not every city has accomplished. So since 2012, we've been able to do it, and we continue the tradition this year.
Thank you, Frank. Well done.
I think there's something I think there's something more worthy to speak to, and that's they only gave out 461 awards out of all the cities nationally. I mean, and we were one of the 461. That's
impressive.
Outstanding.
Very impressive.
I mean, to stand out like that, and we're a small city, but to stand out like that against the likes of LA and other places is just, it's amazing. Thanks to you two and you. Thank you very much.
Huge kudos.
So and staff and I are available to answer any questions on the grid. Otherwise, that concludes my.
Any questions? Next, Mayor and Councilmember matters, starting with Councilmember Miles, excuse me.
Okay, so I had a busy end of January, February. January 27th through 29th, I attended the ACCOC Washington, D.C. advocacy trip. And ACCOC stands for Associated California Cities, Orange County. That was a very informative trip to Washington, D.C. with a group of either other elected officials and or representatives from Orange County. And learned a lot. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to investigating myself is we all met, and then I was able to get the card of the U.S. Department of Transportation Office of the Secretary Government Affairs Officer, Christopher Mitten, and he and I spoke a little bit about grants, and apparently there's a lot of money out there from the Intergovernmental Office for cities like us, whether it be grants for transportation or beautification or infrastructure, and really tried to pick his brain a little bit, have been communicating via email. He's compiling some stuff for me, so I'm hoping to get a lot more information about that and be able to perhaps down the road offer some sort of suggestions or ideas that will help costs of something somewhere. I don't know. It's money, it's free, and seems to be a lot of it, and a lot of the cities don't realize that it's out there. Right after I got off the plane, which we couldn't land at John Wayne because they closed it. We had to go to LA and they bussed us. The very next day I went to Irvine and did the League of Cities new mayor and councilman training, and that's where I satisfied my AB 1234 and my harassment. There was about 230 people there, all newly elected from all over California. Met people even from cities smaller than us, which was interesting. Then was honored to attend on February 2nd the Villa Park Women's League 50th anniversary fashion show, where I have some bride pictures of Councilman Zimmerman as he's modeling on the.
We get those
on the
on
round.
the
Yes. That was such a great event, and they did Nicole Jones and her husband did this slideshow of the past 50 years and past presidents and the community events, and it was so heartwarming and just an amazing video tribute to the past 50 years, and I was honored to be there, and the Villa Park Women's League has done so much for our community for the past 50 years, so that was an honor to be there. February 13th, I was able to tour the Republic Services, their Eco Center, and I learned a lot about trash and recycling. And one thing I didn't know and told them I would pass on is that, I do my part to recycle, but what I didn't realize, and maybe you guys do, is that you have to clean it before you put it in. And so you talked about a lot of the people that recycle, and they don't. For instance, if you do your Prego jar, which I don't because I make my own sauce, but if you have like a Prego jar and you put it in the recycle, and you also have your cardboard box from your pizza, which I make my own too, then if it breaks and the food gets on the cardboard, it becomes contaminated and they can't use it for the recycling. So that was really eye-opening, and I'm trying to teach my kids now about cleaning out those containers. That really makes a big difference, and it was a very interesting tour. February 23rd was Villa Park Little League's opening day, and Sam Strimick honored the entire city council. Unfortunately, Councilman Zimmerman couldn't attend, and City Manager Steve Franks, but that event was heralded by Chuck Jay and his marching Spartans, and they marched down the street in the parade, and then also the Villa Park High School varsity baseball players, half of whom were Little League players themselves. That was neat to see them come on the field. And then Lisa Ogan, who is the principal of Sarah Villa, was there to be recognized as well. And that is it
Busy.
For me, it's been a very
Busy lady, busy month. Councilmember Zimmerman.
Okay. So there's going to be some duplicates here, but I wanted to just say thanks to Sandy Bass in particular for getting me involved in the Women's League 50th anniversary, convincing she was in cahoots with my wife to get me involved and to do the modeling, which you got to get outside of your comfort zone every once in a while, do something fun, and it was really great. Frank's Menswear did a fantastic job of doing the fitting and getting that all set up, so it was all very smooth, and the whole event was it was just a pleasure to see all the work that's been done, all the camaraderie, all of the community spirit that was invoked by that event. So I was really impressed. It was fantastic. So then I'll go back to that January 27th, 29th, the Association of California Cities, Orange County, the ACCOC, trip to Washington, D.C. I was really impressed with this trip. I didn't realize, my grasp of how this city is able to participate with other cities in affecting change or looking at concepts that might impact the whole country. And I think the thing that impressed me the most was the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs actually met with the cities. We got into a room and they had people and they wanted to know, hey, what are the issues that are impacting your city? And are these things that we need to be thinking about on a bigger scale? And it took from being our small hidden jewel of a city to looking at how the same problems that we have might be impacting other cities and how we're part of something much bigger. And that people much higher up in our government actually care about what's going on in our cities, and that we're not just an island, we're part of something much bigger. And that was my big takeaway there. We were in offices of Congress people that we got to go meet with Congresswoman Katie Porter. She was very interested, in particular in Villa Park. Wanted to know, as our representative, what was going on with us. She's new to her position, but she was very interested, and it was great to see and hear. The building that we were in was right next to the Library of Congress Madison building. There was a quote on the wall there that I love. And so I wrote it down, and I was just going to pass on this quote from James Madison. What spectacle can be more edifying or more seasonable than that of liberty and learning, each leaning on the other for their mutual and surest support? I thought that was it was very well said, and it was a great trip, and I thought that captured part of that moment. So. I also wanted to comment very briefly, went over to Laylo Barbershop, got a fantastic haircut by Thomas, my wife approved. I know they haven't even had their grand opening yet, but I'm looking forward to going back there again, so that's fine.
Okay. I also attended the Villa Park Little League opening day ceremonies and had the opportunity to participate in the float judging with Councilwoman Miles and Councilman Pitts. That was a lot of fun. I got to wear my Villa Park Little League baseball hat from when I managed the Single A Marlins back in, 1998, I guess it was. My son went all the way through Little League. He ended up going all the way through the high school program and playing in college. So it's a wonderful program, and I enjoyed it. Some of the best times I had in my life were on the Little League fields. So it was good to see another season start. I also attended the Villa Park Women's League 50th program over at the Yorba Linda Country Club, and it was great. And last Friday with Mayor Rossini, I attended the Orange County Fire Authority Best and Bravest Awards Banquet, and that recognizes the efforts of our Fire Authority firemen. So, that's my report.
Mayor Pro Tem Pitts.
Well, I was honored to go to the Villa Park Women's League 50th anniversary, but I was honored in a little different way because I saw a picture of my wife being honored as past president of Villa Park Women's League, and I have to tell you, it was really nice to see your picture up there and see you being honored on the stage and so forth. But I've been involved through her with the Women's League for so many years, and they've done amazing things for this city and still continue to do so. And all those past presidents I know work really hard, because I know the dedication and hard work that my wife had to put into her tenure while she was president. And it's a lot of work, and wrangling all those ladies to get them moving in one direction is a very hard thing to do. But congratulations to you, and it was a great event. I also want to commend Pedal Pushers. They won the cake competition. I think we all enjoyed the cake, said that we're sitting around the table. Very creative and very good, too, by the way. On February the 3rd, Councilman Zimmerman and myself participated in the Villa Park High School Spartan Pancake Breakfast. I was the chef. I think he was one of the helpers and servers. So we had a great day there. It was pouring down rain and windy and cold, but still it was a great event. I think we raised a lot of money for the high school. Congratulations to them. I also attended the Villa Park opening day on Saturday. Thank you. We enjoyed judging the floats. That was fun. Councilman Collicott and myself were judges for the float competition, and it was fun seeing all the kids, coming out in the street and screaming and yelling and carrying on in the different. I think Mayor Rossini had his truck all decorated, and he was leading the pack there, so it was a great day. And then last and final, I'd like for all of us to keep in our thoughts Pam Dunn. She's done a lot of amazing things for this city, and she's a matriarch in this city. And she had a little accident the other day and caused some harm to herself, and I just want to wish her well-being and speedy recovery.
And a happy birthday.
And a happy birthday. That's it.
Thank you.
Mayor, before you do yours and then close the evening, like usual, I forgot one thing.
By all means.
May I?
Ladies first.
So in regards back to the Washington, D.C. trip, and then Councilman Zimmerman and I were very good about making sure that we had our receipts and stuff, except, and I should have known better, I didn't obtain any itemized, so I'm not turning anything in for expenses because I believe it should be itemized. And that takes me back to our travel policy that we had worked on last month, and I wanted to know, if possible, if we could amend it to include itemized receipts for all expenditures that are being requested for reimbursement. So it has to be itemized.
Yeah, we will be bringing back that, so we can include that element in the policy when it comes back to the council.
Thanks. That was it.
Sorry, if I may also.
By all means.
I apologize. Actually, it's a question for Mayor Pro Tem, or maybe we have the compost day coming up, March 3rd or March 6th. Do you know? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Is it March 3rd?
March 3rd.
March 3rd.
3rd.
Okay.
3rd.
Great. I just wanted to
I
say
see
something about.
three in the audience.
Yeah.
Is it March 3rd or is it March 2nd? Do we know?
3rd. Saturday.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we all. So that's been great. We love being able to get the compost there, and so I just wanted to.
Second, March
March
2nd.
2nd. It was the second, I think. Yeah.
March 2nd.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay.
My daughter's birthday.
Any further? All right. I previously mentioned that attended meetings at the Orange County Fire Authority on January 24th, February 5th. Attended the Law Enforcement Advisory Committee on February 26th. Was joined by Councilmember Collicott on February 22nd at the Orange County Fire Authority's Best and Bravest. Truly a fantastic event, and I'm really hopeful that all of council can be there next year, because it really is one of those events that in the past a lot of entire cities have attended, and I just can't speak highly enough about the event and the commitment of the department and their personnel. Truly some heroic acts and great people, and just a great evening.
I've attended past. It's great.
Yeah, it really is. The Women's League 50th anniversary, I unfortunately was sicker than a dog, and I want to apologize, a heartfelt apology. I had signed up to go, but I didn't think anybody wanted to be anywhere near me. I was hacking up a lung, so I apologize, but I think in the interest of everybody's health, it was good that I stayed away. Opening day for Villa Park Little League. Truly an honor for me to drive a bunch of knucklehead kids in the back of my truck and participate in that. And it was great to host them. We're still recovering a little bit from that. And I want to thank my wife. I went to the Orange County Best and Bravest that evening, and I left my wife holding the bag. She cleaned up, she organized, she kept the damage to a minimum, and my wife Laura really needs a huge
Bouquet
hand
of
from
flowers.
me. I mean, yeah, bouquet of flowers.
Andy?
I think is a start. So she deserves a lot of credit. I want to thank the parents and the coaches and the kids also. Truly a great day. I also had the opportunity, I felt it was really important that during our last rain event that I do an impromptu tour of as many schools as I could get to in Villa Park, and I was able to get 3 out of 4 in. And I visited the elementary schools and the middle school, and heard a few complaints here and there, but by and large they did very, very well, despite the tremendous amount of rain that we were having that day. And I want to thank the principals and their staff for giving me that opportunity. Please keep up the good work, and I know that the district is trying to work to improve things, and we'll continue to partner as many opportunities as possible. Let's see. Lastly, there was a Red Cross blood drive on, I believe it was February 22nd. I had a last-minute phone call from somebody from the Red Cross, and I was able to go down there and give a pint. If you see those signs in the future, please come down if you're capable of doing it. Give a pint of blood. It can make a huge difference. I want to thank Hillary Thomas for help putting that out there. And her whole crew. It was a great event, and happy to do it again. And that's all I have. So, do we have a motion for adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
Second. Let's do it. Thank you, everybody.
Well, you still don't have